Spend enough time in WordPress, and sooner or later, it's quite possible that you're going to get some kind of a critical error. And that error message is going to look like this. And you may see something that says, there's been a critical error on your website. Please check your site admin email inbox for instructions. Well, what that little message is doing is telling you that WordPress detected a problem and it sent a recovery email to your email address if you have that specified. If you don't have your administrator address specified, then you don't know how to fix anything. You could go to your website and all people see is that error message, that there's been a critical error. Obviously, that's not good for business. So in this video, we're going to talk about what recovery mode is, some of the things that can cause critical errors, and how you can go back and recover your WordPress website. All right, let's start off with recovery mode. There are a couple of things in WordPress. There's safe mode, and then there's recovery mode. And here's the difference. Safe mode will attempt to disable everything. So it'll disable plugins, it'll disable themes, it'll disable something, and you basically get like almost a clean WordPress installation. So nothing looks the way it should. Recovery mode is a bit more intelligent. This came around in version 5.2. And what it will do is try to detect which plugin or theme is causing the problem. And then it will disable that plugin or whatever part of the theme it is. You can log in using recovery mode from the email that it sent you. Or if there's a thing that you can put on the end of your URL to activate recovery mode. And once you get inside, it'll try and point out where the problem is. So you can disable the theme or plugin or the code that's causing your problem. So some of the things that can cause problems in WordPress, most of the time it's going to be a plugin. Poorly written code is usually the thing, and plugins update a lot more than anything else. And plus, plugins sometimes conflict with one another. You may be able to roll back to a previous version of the plugin, and that'll take care of your problem. You may be able to disable the plugin if you don't need it for something specific, and then wait for the vendor to come up with a fix. Maybe you can restore from a previous backup, and we'll take a look at some of the examples here. That's what happens is your site crashes because something very simple probably confused it and it can't run anymore. It could be something as simple as removing a semicolon from some code, and then it can no longer parse the code line, and it says, I don't know what to do. I just throws its hands up in the air and said, I quit. That's why we want to talk a little bit about how to recover your crashed WordPress website from a critical error. All right, let's take a look at a couple of things. All right, so obviously my WordPress site isn't crashed right now. You can see it over here, but the way to get into recovery mode is to go to your URL, and you're going to add something to the end of it, and it's going to look like this. And you can see now where I've got my URL, then wplogin.php, and then there's a question mark, action equals entered _ recovery _ mode. Now, something to keep in mind, if you're using some plugin or tool that has changed the URL of your login page, let's say instead of wp-login.php, you made it my login. You need to put that in here. So this only works if that's what your site is using. And that's the default for most sites, so that'll work. But if you've changed the login address, you need to change it here. So we'll go ahead and click into this recovery mode. And you'll see over here where it says recovery mode initialized, please log in to continue. And then you'll get a box where you can just kind of log in as you normally would. So the next thing, since I have two-factor authentication set up from WordFence, it's prompting me for that. So I'm going to go over and get my Authy, and we'll go ahead and let me move this over here. I'm going to copy that code and put it in here. So that tells you something right off the bat. I don't have any problems with Authy, and it is still working. So the plugins I have are still working here because on this website, nothing's broken. Now, you may notice up here, if there is a problem, it'll show you how to exit recovery mode. It'll be like a bright red thing. And if you have a problem plugin, you'll see something on the side that will tell you which plugin is giving the problem. Since there's no problems on my site, it's not showing me that right now. But I want to show you a couple things here in the settings. We're going to go to General, and here where it says Administration Email Address. If WordPress detects a problem, this is the email address that it's going to send a recovery link to. So you'll get an email, click the link there, and it will bring you in with recovery mode. If for some reason you don't have this specified or you don't have access to that email address before, then you can use the URL that I just showed you to enter in recovery mode. All right, so what happens if you don't have that email address and whatever reason, you can't get in from the WordPress web interface? Another thing you can do is go into your FTP client. So I've got one here. I'm using Transmit. And you see here where I've got my demo server. I just double click that. It brings me in. And I want to go to this one, public_HTML. And you're going to look for this file, wp-config.php. So we're going to take a quick look at that. And I added this line in here. By default, this line isn't there, but if you don't have it, if you can get in, you don't have an administrator email in your WordPress site for whatever reason, you can still get to recovery mode, but you have to define that email address. So I'm going into my wp-config. If you can get into that with your FTP client, you can add this line, define, and in quotes, you'll see recovery_mode_email, comma, or excuse me, close quote, and then comma. Then again in quotes, your email address. Close the quote there, close the parentheses, and add a semicolon. So it'll look just like that. Now that you have that defined, so even if you did not put a recovery email address in your WordPress settings, you got this, so you just save this, and now you should be able to put in the recovery mode to the URL and get in that way. All right, so what else are you going to do in case those things don't work, or maybe you need to get back? Maybe you don't know how to fix the plugin and you need it, but that version is not working. You don't have a previous version to roll back to. That may be the time where you need to restore from a backup. And there's a couple of ways you can do that. If you have a WordPress host that makes backups for you, then you can go ahead and restore from that backup. Now, granted, you may lose whatever you've updated on your WordPress site since that backup, but at least your WordPress site will come up and it'll be working again. One of the tools I like using is called UpDraftPlus. So you can see it right here as a plugin. And if you come down to settings, you'll see UpDraftPlus backups. That's another way to get to it. So this is a third-party plugin, and it does a great job. I really like it. And what you can do is you can schedule these backups. Also, if you do updates, you can have it prompt you to do a backup before you do the update, which I think is a good idea. And of course, you can always come in here and just say backup now. And then you find out that you've got existing backups that you can restore depending upon when they were taken. So I've got backups that were taken before updates. And then I've got, a full backup with database plugins, themes, everything else. You can choose what you want to back up, whether it's just the database and the plugins, whether it's the database, the WordPress core, or everything all at once. This little icon here is for Dropbox. You can decide if you want to have UpDraftPlus save in a number of locations. So they offer a service that you can use. You can use Google Drive. You can use Dropbox. Let's come over here to settings and take a quick look. So Updraft Vault is the service that they offer. You can have an FTP someplace, but Amazon S3, Google Drive, Microsoft OneDrive, there's plenty of things over here. And these things will all work. I've got Dropbox set up. You can also set your schedule. So do you want it to do manually? Or you've got options for different times that it will go through. So some of these things, like when is it going to back up the files? I probably do that weekly. And then the database schedule, I want to do daily perhaps. And then do you want to add an incremental backup every so often? Well, you can do that as well too. There's plenty of options here. And really, you're only limited by the space you have and how long you retain these files. So you can say, every time I do a backup, it sends to Dropbox. Inside of Dropbox, or whatever your service is, it'll come up with a little path like this. And then where I've got demo, that is the name of the WordPress application that you have. So this one is demo. I have other ones like Suburbia Press. I've got different sites, and I can have my backups in a folder for each site. And I can show what do I want to include with files. And that's the plugins, themes, uploads. And then you can say all of these other things, like what do you want to include or exclude? So you've got an exclusion rule you can provide there. Do you want to encrypt your database? Do you want to back up more databases? Do you want to send reports when this happens? And then that just gives you a lot of options and a lot of flexibility. it is a great way to protect your site. One of the things I really like about this is because you can set your own schedules and they can work automatically, you can do it much more frequently than what your host probably provides. Your host is likely going to do it one time a day. And maybe some of them might give you an on-demand, but by the time you need it, on-demand is probably too late. The other problem is, if you have a problem getting to your host, you can't restore that backup. I like my backups to be on a separate physical server or location from my WordPress server. So that's another advantage of using Dropbox or UpDraftPlus with any of the services that it connects with. So I really recommend this. I'll have a link to this in the description below. They have a free version and they also have a paid version, so it's up to you to decide what works for you. I've got the paid version because it gives me more features and more flexibility. So you'll see where it says premium extensions, and then you just kind of connect with your account, and then you get whatever add-ons that you've decided to get. So that's up to you. But another nice part about Updraft is that you can clone your site and move it from one server to another server. So maybe your server is the problem and you've got a backup. So now you can move those files over to another server and keep on running. For the purpose of a crash site, having a backup and restoring it is probably the quickest and easiest way to get through there if disabling a plugin in recovery mode doesn't work. Now, a number of things can cause this kind of crash. It could be, most likely, a code problem with a plugin. Could be a theme problem or maybe a child theme problem. Another thing is that it could be that your resources aren't sufficient. So maybe you're asking for the site to use too few resources, not enough memory, and you've got so many plugins and so many things running that it's just overwhelmed. You might be able to go into your wp-config.php file and increase the amount of RAM that it uses, provided that your hosting server gives you enough RAM that you can expand that. You might be able to go in and change the amount of caching that you're doing. So those are things like, if it's not a plugin or a theme problem, I would look at resources. Look at how much RAM do you have, and look at how much are you configuring WordPress to use. By default, I think it's only like 32 megabyte of RAM, maybe 64 megabyte. I've got a site, that some of them are 128 megabytes of RAM. That's because I use a server with 4 gigabytes of RAM, and I've got multiple hosts on there. I've got multiple WordPress installations. So I can add more RAM to each of those so that they continue to work well. I can have a large cache, and I've got other resources. And plus, I've got multi-threaded CPU, so I can have multiple tasks going on at the same time. Hosting is one of the best ways to prevent these kind of conflicts where you're running out of resources. So keep that in mind. It could be a plugin with a coding error, and that's most likely, but sometimes the resources that you have are the problem. In my case, I use Cloudways, and I've got a 4 gigabyte server with 2 CPU cores, so I really don't seem to run into problems with that. And I'll leave a link to that down in the description below as well. But this is how you can recover from a critical error on WordPress and some of the things that causes it. Hopefully this doesn't happen to you. If it does, now you know how to go in and troubleshoot and hopefully fix the problem. Thank you so much. I hope this was helpful to you. If you've ever had a problem with a crashed website and you don't know what to do, please leave a comment for me below, and maybe that'll help somebody else out, or maybe we'll get you an answer for your problem. Take care. I'll see you again in the next video.